Reb Chaim Brisker, in his Sefer on the Rambam, it's Mispar 31, in Hilchos Yibum Chalitza, Parak Daled Halacha Tes Zayin. You have to number every Reb Chaim on the Rambam, and it ends at 155. If you numbered right, it ends at 155. This is Mispar 31. He differentiates between Chalitza and Gittin and Kedushin. Chalitza on one side and Gittin Kedushin on the other side. When it comes to a Katan who performs the Chalitza with his Yavama, the Katan needs to understand he has to understand the proceedings enough so that he is aware that he is performing the act of Chalitza. But he doesn't have to fully understand all the implications of his actions. He doesn't have to understand the inyan of Yibum, the inyan that Chalitza is like a get, as long as he understands that he has to do this Maisa Chalitza. As long as there's an adult or Bezdin that they're supervising him, we say that the act of Chalitza was done with Kavana, hence the Chalitza is valid, and the Yavam is free to marry. But in the case of a Katan who attempts to make a Dushan, or he wants to be Megarish his wife, how did he get a wife? Because he married her through Yibum. After you do Yibum, you could give a get. And in a Katan, can do Yibum. Yibum doesn't take any das. And now he wants to be Megarish his wife, and he's a Katan. He has not yet reached godless. No amount of adult or expert supervision will help to have him give her a get. He has to wait till he is a gadol to give a get. In the case of Gittin and Kedushin, Zokter Reb Chaim, a true level of intelligence using plan and purpose is necessary, for he has to know the meaning of his actions, and he doesn't if he's just a cut. This is due to the fact that it's only through one's intelligence and understanding that it can be said that one generated the Chalos of Gittin and Kedushin. So that if he doesn't understand, he cannot be called the producer of the Chalos of Gittin and Kedushin. A Katan doesn't have a din das, hence he is not an Isa. In summation, the Mekadosh and the Megarish generate the Chalos. They make the Chalos Chal. Hence, they must have a full measure of intelligence, of das, plan and purpose. In the case of Chalitza, the Chalitz does not generate the heter to the Yavama, but rather, he just creates a Chalitza act. And the Yavama then is automatically free to marry by the din established by the Parsha of Yibum, and so much for the words of Reb Chaim. We should elaborate more on these matters. When we say, as Reb Chaim does, that it takes a full measure of reason and intelligence to generate Gittin and Kedushin, let us pose a chakira. Is that because the Chalos effect takes place through the act of Kedushin making or Gerushin making? That is, he generates the Chalos by utilizing the acts of a Maisa Kedushin and a Maisa Gerushin, just as one drives a nail into wood using a hammer to build a structure. We don't say that after his actions his hammer drove the nails and he pounded with his hammer, and the hammer, second stage, drove the nails and built the structure. Rather, the wielder of the hammer did everything, and his design and knowledgeable striking was the means for achieving the building with the hammer, and with the hammer just as a tool. Right, so the same thing with a get, a Nesina's get, and a Nesina's Kedushin. Through the tool of a Nesina's get and Nesina's Kesef Kedushin, it is the Mekadosh and the Megarish that actually creates the Chalos. He generates the Chalos. Except that without it, also that's one point position in our Chakir. Or shall we postulate that it takes a full measure of reason and intelligence because it is his mind and his will that generates the Chalos. So what do you need of mice? Except that without an act to go along with his will, we will merely have his wish, which is insufficient. It's because it'll be called Dvarim Shebelev, and it's Einam Dvarim. and by itself, his wish won't produce the effect. But when he does have the Maisa, it is his desire, it's his chayf, it's his rotzen, it's that produces the effect. A Maisa is necessary so that the maker's wish resides in the Maisa. For only then may we infer a real will for the Chalos. So there's two positions. Does it work like a person who uses tools, or actually it's his mamsh's rotzen, and the Maisa is just to encapsulate, have a place where his rotzen is gathered. In answer, we cite the words of the Rivash. In Chalos and Chuvas Shin Kaf Ches, we have a Rivash that writes that before Matan Torah, one could transfer a future entity. In other words, a davar, other makna davar shaloi b'aliyom. When we say that we hold that you cannot be makna davar shaloi b'aliyom. For example, if one were to sell the fruit of this tree way before any fruit begins to show, now that doesn't help. We paskin, not like Reb Meir, Chamim hold that you cannot do this. It's not valid, and it's not a good mekach, and you don't have to. There is no mekach. The guy can decide he wants to keep it. He can give it to somebody else. Nothing. If he took money for it, he has to give it back. Now this presents a difficulty. What stops someone from selling a future entity, a davar shalom b'loylam? It's not because there's nothing to sell. He only means to sell the fruit when it appears, not before. So what's wrong with that? It would seem that the reason that one cannot grant a kinyan in an item that he does as yet not possess is because we feel that he's not serious. If one were to sell the fruit of his tree to another in the winter, way before any fruit begins to show, he really doesn't mean it. So then, why would it be right to do this before Matan Torah? Didn't sellers have to mean it, kaida Matan Torah also? To explain, we cite the Chinuch Mitzvah Shin Lamed Vav, who states that the need to execute a Maisa Kinyan, you must have a Maisa Kinyan. Otherwise, it's not a mekach and it's not a matana. But the need to execute a Maisa Kinyan to transfer property is a result of the pasuk in Vayikra Chafei, pasuk Yudalid, Oikona miyada misecha. So, what the Rivash would be saying is prior to this parsha, there will be no need to perform a Maisa. Only after Matan Torah was a Maisa Kinyan required. Hence, we learn from the Rivash that the shortcoming of selling or granting a future item lies in the making of Kinyan, not a deficiency in the grantor's earnestness. He's not serious. Because Kaida Matan Torah, you didn't have to be serious. Therefore, before Matan Torah, it's a chesaron in the making of the Kinyan, and after Matan Torah. But before Matan Torah, where there was as yet no din of that you must have a Maisa Kinyan, so even if we know that he mean, and he doesn't even mean Maisa Kinyan if we it helps. So then after but after Matan Torah, where the Maisa Kinyan was required, so then it doesn't help Adam Dav Shalom B'Olam, even though, it doesn't help. It doesn't help even though we know he means it. Hence the Rivash says that only after Matan Torah is there a problem with selling a future entity, because we don't care that he means it, but it doesn't help because there is the once we need a Maisa Kinyan does not help on a davar shalom b'olam. Kaida Matan Torah, that there was no need for a Maisa Kinyan, and so we know that he's really in earnest. That helped. Now, if we assume that it is his will and his rotzen that generates the Chalos, except that we always need a Maisa to go along with it, so then we have or otherwise it's a defect of davar shalom. Then what is the difference between before the parsha and after the parsha? What is the difference between Kaida Matan Torah and Achar Matan Torah? It must be the case that one generates the Chalos by utilizing the Kinyan, the act of Kinyan. And the inability to be able to be makna davar shelo b'olam is because of a flaw in the kinyan making, not in the grantor's sincerity or earnestness. Before Matan Torah, there was no such flaw, because there was no Maasiyas Kinyan required. But after Matan Torah, that we need a Maasiyas Kinyan, then there's a problem, and the makna davar shelo b'olam. Then so that according to this Rivash, it is not the problem that he doesn't really mean it by davar shelo b'olam. It's because we need a Maasiyas Kinyan, and a Maasiyas Kinyan does not work on a davar shelo b'olam. Now, the question now arises, if we assume that the seller is serious, and that's enough, and he's serious enough about giving away the fruit of the tree way before it's even sprouted, then what is the problem with selling a future entity? What is the problem in making a kinyan? To be certain, there are early Achronim who disagree with the Ravash. The Numki Yosef in Bava Metzias Daf Samach Vav Amud Beis, the Marsha in Bava Metzias Tes Vav Amud Beis, they are of the view that the fault of a future entity is indeed a lack of earnestness, and therefore it's very good. It doesn't help because when he's not serious, and it's not chal if he's not serious. We will return and explain their positions later, but in the Rivash who holds that you are earnest, and that's why it helped Kaida Matan Torah. Just after Matan Torah that you need to do a Maasiyas Kinyan, then it doesn't help. What's wrong with the Maasiyas Kinyan? In an effort to explain the matter of makna davar shelo b'olam, we pose a question: who actually causes kinyan to come to be in a sale or a matana? Is it the seller or the buyer? Is it the kaina or the makna? We know that it is the kaina that does the mashicha or the hagbah on the item that he's acquiring, and in the case of land, it is the kaina that does the actions of chazaka when he takes another lands to be his own. Do we conclude that the kaina is the generator of kinyan, but of course with the permission of the makna? But no, it is decided by the Rosh Hashiva Zichron Livracha that it is the makna that generates the kinyan. It is not the cause that it is not the case that the kaina makes the chalais kinyan with the permission of the makna, but rather the makna creates the chalais kinyan by utilizing the maasiyas kinyan of the kaina. We bring a few proofs to this. In the Gemara Gittin Dafayin Zion, there was a incident, Ahush Chivmara. We find a case of a man who was sick with his final illness, and he wanted to give a get to his wife to protect her from having to fall to Yibum. The actual get was ready to go, but it was too close to Shabbos, and a get is muktzah, so everything was put aside until after Shabbos. On Shabbos, it became clear that he would not make it through the day. They asked Rava what to do, and Rava advised the husband to instruct his wife to be kind of the room in which the get lay. She closed the door, she opened the door of that room, and therefore she was kind of the room with chazaka, and the get with chatzar became her room. So then she was kind of because it's in her chatzar, so that she was mugreshus and did not fall to yibum when her husband died on Shabbos. Good. Taisvus Deriamaskal with Tezel Ihi ask, how could the gerushin be valid? It has the defect of being a case of tli gitach mi'al gabe karka. Since she executed the kinyan by closing the door or opening the door, a proper nesina is lacked. For example, if the Megarsh does not hand the get directly to his wife, but he lays it on a table or on the ground and she picks it up, she's not Mugareshus. From the pasuk of V'nosam biyoda, we learn that his releasing the get and her taking it is illegitimate. There needs to be a nesinus haget, a giving of the get by the husband to her for gerushin to take place. And that appears to be missing in our case. She made the kinyan. She took the get. Taisus answers that the room became hers because he was makna the room to her when he instructed his wife to be kind of the room using chazaka And you usually say to the kaina, the makna usually says to the kaina, lechazeku kni, and then then when the kaina makes the chazaka, the makna is actually creating the chalais kinyan for the kaina, and he's using the kaina's chazaka to a isha. You would have to say l'chi chizki ukni, and then therefore it's as if he gave her the get. He gave her the get because he was the makna. He made it hers. From this Taisus, we see that even though the kaina executes the Maisa Kinyan, it is the makna that generates the Chalais Kinyan, utilizing the Maisa of the kaina as means that he, the makna, uses to produce the Chalais Kinyan. It then turns out that the Gershon did take place because he made the Kinyan happen. Rather, it turns out the Gershon didn't take place because she made the kinyan happen. Rather, it was made by hers by the husband's grant. He made the room become hers, and as a result, the get became hers through the din of Chotzer. She did not produce the kinyan, but rather kinyan took place by virtue of his being makna the room to her. Hence, Taisa says, it is as if he gave her the get. It was your makayim v'nosam biyoda. That's one proof. He's the makna generates the chalais kinyan. In Bamitzia Daf Tesam at Beis, we have an inquiry by Rebbe Lozer in a case when one says to another, make a kinyan mashicha on this behem of mine, and you should be kind of the kalim, the articles that are loaded upon her. There was a question as to whether the mashicha on the animal helps to be kind of the articles loaded on her, even though the mashicha was never made directly with the articles. Normally, you pick up the article, you drag if you were kind of the behema, you want to be kind of behema, you drag the behema. If you want to be kind of a box of cereal, you pick up the box of cereal. But here he didn't touch the articles that he was going to be kind of. He only schlepped the behema, and mela the articles went along with the behema. So the question is that considered a good mashicha? Because the Emma says, if it were dead weight, perhaps if he could just take a box with all the stuff in it, he'd schlep the box, and it would be considered mashicha on everything inside the box. But the animal is an animal. When you schlep an animal, it's the animal that moves. So is this considered a mashicha? In the middle, the Gemara asks, liknois. It says, he says, shach behemazu liknois kalim shalel. Liknois miyama lekni. Did he say kni? He said liknois. Is that good? So the expression "Yishul be kaina" is problematic, and why? Rashi claims that the problem is that the phrase instructs the kaina to acquire the stuff, but it lacks the idea that the seller is giving the article away. Now, it seems implausible to interpret Rashi to mean that the seller's intention was devious, namely, you can do a mashicha, but I'm not giving it away. And I'm not granting you these articles. Of course, he means to let go of the articles. That's the whole idea. What how we have to learn Pshat Rashi is that according to Rashi, the Gemara is saying that based on the phraseology used, the implication is that the buyer should generate the chalais kinyan. Liknois. If he said liknois, it means that the kaina should be kaina. You should be, and that is invalid. And because you have to have a lashon that implies that I am granting you and I'm just using your Ma'aseh Mashiach. And that's exactly how you say. That only the Makna can generate the Chalais Kinyan. We can see that the Rambam learns like that. In Mechira Parak Beis Halacha Ches, he's consistent with our Yesod. He writes that if one says do a Mashiach and you shall be kind of the article, do Mashiach on the and you shall be kind of again we're talking about we're not necessarily talking about a behem over there, but he says the same lashon that the Gemara and Bamitzia used, liknois. So he's not kind of because you shall be kind of implies you acquire the item in the future, and this lacks an indication that the grantor means to grant the item. The Maggid Mishnah explains that this is the Rambam's understanding of our Gemara and Bamitzia, and that liknois means you shall acquire in the future. Again, it seems unlikely to infer from the Maggid Mishnah that the problem is that the seller is being deceptive and doesn't mean to grant the item at all. Rather, the defect is that there is no indication that the seller is the makna. And it sounds like you shall be kind of. Actually, if the point of the Rambam is that in using the future tense, the seller means not to let go of the item at all, and he's just fooling around, and then he would come into conflict with the Gemara in the very beginning of the Durham, where the use of the future tense harei olai lihi ois nozer works to make himself a nozer. So the future tense is not a problem. Based on this Rambam, we can confirm that it's a principle in Kinyan that the makna is the generator of Chalais Kinyan, and the use of the future tense indicates that the kaina should be the producer. You'll produce the Kinyan, which is invalid. But when it comes to neder, naziris, there is no requirement that the neder needs to generate the Chalais naziris. Hence, using the future tense helps, for it does mean that he desires to have the Chalais naziris be chal. Just like, it means that liknois means that you should be kaina. The problem is, it doesn't indicate that I'm makna to you. You should just be kaina. But in naziris it works. I do not have to have that the neider naziris is the one who makes the Chalais naziris. Now, just to digress a bit, the reason why is because, and it's Yisai by the Rosh Hashiva, that the neider or a nishba does not directly make the Isser or the Naziris. Rather, the neder just creates an entity of Lashon. A Lashon, you say the right formula of Lashon, and it's from that Lashon that all the dinim of neder flows. Hence, as long as the meaning of the Lashon is to have Naziris be, the Lashon can function. But it's not enough just to want a Chalais Kinyan to take place. The makna must do a grant of the item to the kaina. He must do haknoah. And if you use just if you just use the future tense, there is no haknoah in the taich. Now we return to the case of a davar shelo b'olam, a future entity. We have shown that the deficiency to grant the davar shelo b'olam is not a lack of earnestness. It's not a lack of gemiras das, not a lack of seriousness. To pin down the problem with the davar shelo b'olam, we start by asking that we find that one can be makadosh a woman and have the kedushin take place at a later date, lachar shloshim yom. You can make a kedushin lachar shloshim yom, not mehayom, just plain lachar shloshim yom, and it's nothing till the 30th day. If she would accept kedushin from a second person before the set date of the first person, the din is that she's mekudeshes to the second, as long as the second date for kedushin terminates before the first date. That's a mishnah in kedushin daf nun ches amud beis. That means that until the target date of the kedushin, she's not mekudeshes. You see that she can accept another person's offer of kedushin. Yet the mishnah says that if nothing occurs to prevent the first kedushin from taking place, then the isha is mekudeshes to the original mekadosh. Why isn't this a case of davar shelo b'olam? Do we not see that one can indeed create a chalais on a future entity? The woman of day 30 that is not here yet. The woman of day 30 is going to be here only on day 30. Now, so what we do is we refer back to our yesod that there must be a makna who grants, who's makna, in order for kinyan to be chal. It is not enough just to allow the buyer to be kaina. The owner must make the item become the recipients. The buyer must make the item become the recipients. If that is so, we suggest that the owner must have the ability and the power to be makna. It's a power. Normally, this ability comes from the fact that he's the buyer. In the case where a fruit is not as yet developed off his tree, nothing is there to be a bailam about. Hence, the grantor lacks the ability to be makna anything. So we point out that by mekadosh lachar l'amid yom, that's not a case of davar shelo b'olam, because the ishim hamukudeshes exists now and could become mukudeshes in the immediate presence. Hence, he has the power and the ability to have kedushin take place now, and so then he has the kedushin, the ability to take place on day 30 also. But if he doesn't have any Paris on his tree yet, he has nothing. So if he has nothing, so even though he doesn't want to make the kinyan take place now, only when the fruit comes out and produces, but since the fruit is not here yet, he doesn't have the bias and the power to do it, and that's what allows us to understand the quality of a concept called avidi da'asu. The Gemara in Bav Basra, Dafayan Tesson Bay, states that in order to sell a future entity the produce of a tree before it sprouts, it must be the case that it usually occurs. This is even there's a machlekes Reb Meir and Reb Hana. We hold that ain't on a makdav shalom ever, but Reb Meir says yes, the fruits of a tree you could sell, but even he holds that you need this concept of avida da'asu, that it usually materializes, it usually occurs. If not, then even Reb Meir will admit that einad makdav shalom b'loila. Now, according to the view of discerners, if it's haphazard, if we're talking about something, for example, if a person says he's a guy and he says, I'll be Makadishu to an Isha Yisraelis, I'll be Makadishu after I'm Gayer, right? It's not a Vida Da'asu. It's not usual that there are many obstacles before there's Gershon. Bezdin might not accept him. Who knows? He might even not find a Bezdin. Just simply a Chesorn and Hechatimsa. So it's not something you can depend on. Doesn't regularly show up. It's not close to you. It's not a thing that will happen as in time and usual. So therefore that doesn't help. But in the case of Paris to Dekel, that it's Avida also every year. Just pears come out, good years, good stuff. A bad year less. But usually the pears come out, and he's selling whatever comes out. So now that's a vinidi also, and you can sell that. There it helps the davar shalom oilam according to Rav. We the Chachamim hold that even there it doesn't help. Now, according to the view of those that hold that when selling a future entity there's a lack of earnestness, so Navidah also makes perfect sense. Since this future entity regularly and usually occurs, he counts on it, and it's serious, and he's serious about it. According to Rav Meir, according to us, he's never serious about it. In our system, though, which most Shittas subscribe to, how does the factor of Avidi also enhance Davar Shalom B'Lo'olam? The answer is that since it regularly, according to our system, the problem is that you're not a Bailim on something that doesn't exist yet. So the answer is that since it regularly and usually materializes, then it's nearer to be an actual and concrete and tangible thing. The future entity can then contribute power to the Bailim even now, so that he will have the ability to be mocked to the article even now. Really, Reb Meir holds that a lack of reality will leave the Bailim with a lack of power to effect a grant and a future entity, just like the Chachamim. Just that the nearness of the future entity, the Avidi Da'asu, bridges this gap and provides the Bailim with the power just to be mocked, and just the present entity does. We find that the Chachamim argue with Reb Meir and hold Einod Amat Davar Shalom B'Lo'olam, even in a case where it's Avidi Da'asu. But even they will allow creating Chalos in a future entity if there is the parameter of Biyodai. One cannot free a growing crop of its Truma obligations before a Chiyuv takes place. Truma, and as long as the crop has not been harvested, it's still attached to the ground, it's growing, it's called Patur, and it does not help to set aside Truma for growing produce from grain that was cut and harvested and is obligated. Ein Tormin min Chiyuv ala Patur. In Kedushin Daf Samach Beis on Beis, we have Rabbi Yochanan who states that if one wants to give Truma for a growing crop, he can designate grain that was already harvested and is chayv in Truma to be the Truma for the growing crop. And he says, when the growing grain shall be reaped, then this is Truma for that grain. Lichashi yitlashu. Continues Rabbi Yochanan, this is not a problem with being that it's considered a davar shalom b'Lo'olam because the growing crop is not yet chayv in Truma, because since it's within one's capability, it's biyodai to cut the crop down and bring the produce to a situation of a chiyuv truma. You could cut it right now. You could harvest it right now. I mean, maybe you wanted to let it go longer, but you could physically, theoretically, just cut it down now, and then it would become chayv and truma. So therefore, even if you didn't do it yet, but since it's in your capability to do it, you have the power and the ability to make truma, to be mafresh truma on it. Again, according to the view, those that hold that when selling a future entity, there's a lack of earnestness. Biyada is a very understandable concept. There's normally a lack of earnestness with respect to a future entity, but if it's in one's capability to bring about the future entity, one tends to think of it as existent already. But under our system, in a similar vein to Avidi Asu, what Rabbi Yochanan means to teach us is that if one can bring about the situation in which he has the capability to achieve the Chalos, we can say that even now he has the ability to generate the din. We return to clarify. So let us just make if a Chalos, we were talking about according to the Rivash that the Chalos is made by tools that of a kinyan, of a Maisa kinyan, and then we said that who actually produces the Chalos? It's the Makna, but not because he wishes it so, because he takes his wishes and he uses Maisa kinyans to make the Chalos bichal, to make the kinyan bichal. That's what he does by the Makna does when the Kaina does the kinyan. That's when, and in the same case, Gershon and Kedushin, the Migarish and the Mikadosh use a Maisa to make the Kedushin, and hence you need a gadol. That's why we started off. It doesn't help a cotton with the Amid al Gabav with supervision, because a cotton can't be said to act with plan and purpose, and if you don't act with plan and purpose, there's no making, there's no asiyah. You can't be a makna, because unless you understand what you're doing, you can't be a mikadesh. But you can do a chalitza, because a chalitza you don't make the heter, you just make a chalitza, and for kavana, a kid has kavana. Now we went off to the problem of davar shalom b'lo olam, and we explained it according to the system of Rav Shainim that followed the Rivash, that the Kohen Matan Torah helped and Lachar Matan Torah doesn't, and it's a result of the fact that Kohen Matan Torah, your wishes alone created the kinyan, whereas Lachar Matan Torah, you need a kinyan, and you create the kinyan using your Maisa kinyan, but it's not the wish directly that does it. Your plan, your purpose, your wishes manifest themselves and take advantage of Maisa Kinyan, and it's a Maisa Kinyan that does it. They take advantage of a Maisa Kedushin, and through the Maisa Kedushin you do it. But it's not your direct wish. But we hold that there's plenty of there's Achrayim that hold that no, that the problem with davar shalom b'lo olam is that you're not serious. We have to clarify these shittas. We've clarified the other shittas. Their view is that it's the wish of the seller's and it's the wish of the seller's mind and his will that generates a chalos, even al Matan Torah, except that without an act to go along with it, we will have a defect of davar shalom b'lo olam. In the case of a future entity, there's a lack of seriousness or intention. There's a kasha to pose to these proponents. For we know that when being makdish, we also find that the rule is ein adam makdish davar shaloi bo la'olam. Substaf nun tesam and alf. Now the din is that in case of nidorim, there is no deficiency of asmachta. We will show that asmachta means seriousness. The classical case of asmachta is where a loiva paid part of his debt and told the holder of the shtar that if he doesn't pay the rest by a certain date, the malva can collect the face value of the shtar, even though he already paid part of it. We said that the loiva, even though he said all these things, he really didn't mean it. He just said it to build trust in the eyes of the creditors, to let him go until the next payment date. This is in Bava Basra Kuf Samach Ches Amud Aleph. More says that smachta loikanya. In other words, there's a problem with seriousness here. Gambling is another case of asmachta. For the players, didn't really actually want to give up any money. They all think they're going to win. We are told that a lack of seriousness does not invalidate. Now, that's for money. That's for kinyan. If you don't have serious, if it's asmachta by kinyan, it's loy kanya. That's how we hold. But when it comes to a netter, we're told that an asmachta, a lack of seriousness, does not invalidate a netter. And as long as you spoke it, you said the words of the netter, it's valid. So then why can't one be makdish a future entity? For hektish is a netter. And we said before that the Gemara in Ksubis Daf Nun Tesam Aleph holds that ain't no makdish davar shel b'loilo. What this is only a kasha, according to those achronim that hold that it's a lack of that the problem of davar shel b'loilo is a lack of seriousness, because if you hold that like the other shittas, it's not a lack of seriousness. There's enough seriousness to go around, no matter, because you had to. And why did it help cut him up in Torah? You didn't have to be serious cut him up in Torah. The answer is because lachem up in Torah we have to do a ma'isa, and by hektish you have to do a dibur, and if it's a davar shel b'leilam, you have to have a koyach to be able to create a chalais in the item, and you don't if it doesn't exist yet. But according to the other mandomrim that hold that it's a lack of seriousness, and then kaimat and Torah, lachamat and Torah, what's the difference? The difference is that I guess the difference is no, they hold that kaimat and Torah and lachamat Torah is the same. They hold you couldn't be makdish davar shel b'loilam kaimat and Torah either. It's only the Rivash that said the Chiddush that you could be makdish davar shel b'loilam. So you know why? Because it's a lack of seriousness of kaimat and Torah. You have to be serious also, and it has nothing to do with the Maisa Kinyan. So therefore, we have a kasha from hektish, because we know that hektish, if there's a lack of seriousness, as long as you said the words, or is it kodesh, or is it oila, or is it bedek abayis, we know that it works. You have to just say the formula, and it works. If you don't want it to work, if you're not serious, don't say the formula. So Mela, why is there chasaron of being makdish davar shel b'loilam loyti shitas? The answer that the Rashiva gives is that davar shel b'loilam, there's not the same problem as the problem of ratzon and will by davar shel b'loilam is, according to these shittas, is not the same case as by asmachta. The deficiency is his will at the point when the future entity emerges. Now, in other words, you're right. There is if there's an asmachta case, he says if I'm going to win this poker game, so then I'm makdish all the proceeds to hektish. That's not chasaron of asmachta. It helps, even though it's normally gambling is a chasaron of asmachta, but that's not what they mean. Is the problem of his seriousness and will by davar shel b'loilam. It's the fact that the will at the point where the future entity emerges is not there. It was, if it's one whose will that generates the chalais, then the will must be present at the point where the object materializes. The will that originally existed before the future entity appeared. Why say that will endures for good? Normally it does, but not for a future entity. In other words, it's not a matter of earnestness like we mean by asmachta. Perhaps he's quite earnest about the future entity, but the will for the chalais must be extant at the point where the future entity manifests itself in order to produce the chalais effect.
Goodbye.
And the will for davar shel b'loilam doesn't abide.